All right, so today we are going deep on love like Jesus, selfless love in relationships. Um, I think a lot of you are out there trying to really put this into practice, and I have to say I was really surprised by a lot of what I read.
Yeah, me too. When we think about loving like Jesus, we tend to think outward, right? Like doing good deeds.
Mm.
But this text really brings it back inward. It all starts with understanding the love we've already been given.
Yes, and actually, the source uses a verse from First John to kind of illustrate this.
Right. 1 John 4.1 time.
Hmm.
We love because he first loved us.
Mm-hmm.
And that really struck me. It's not about trying to earn love or deserve love. It's about realizing that we're already swimming in this incredible love from God.
That's a great way to put it, swimming in it. And I think maybe we forget that sometimes, like we get so caught up in trying to be good or worthy of love that we kind of miss the fact that it's already there.
Exactly. And that realization that we are already loved, I mean, completely loved, it changes everything. It takes the pressure off of trying to manufacture love. You can start performing and just be present, in our relationships.
And speaking of relationships, the text kind of goes into all the different ways that we can love like Jesus in different areas of our lives. And the first one it talks about is friendship. And I was really struck by the example of Jesus's own friendships. We all know the stories, but the text really points out how messy and demanding they were.
Yeah, it really highlights how present Jesus was, how much he showed up for his friends.
Mm.
And not just, the celebrations and the easy times, but the tough stuff too.
Hmm.
Grief, conflict, even betrayal.
Yeah, that was so fascinating to me because we tend to think about loving like Jesus as being all sunshine and roses, but his friendships were really real and raw. So how do we kind of reconcile that with those feel good verses about friendship? Like Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." I mean, what do we do with that?
Right. Well, I think that's where it gets really interesting because loving like Jesus in our friendships means being truly present. And that includes being present for the difficult stuff, the messy stuff.
Mm.
It means being willing to have those hard conversations, to speak truth with love, even when it's uncomfortable. And sometimes, it might even mean setting boundaries, even with our closest friends.
I don't think I had thought about setting boundaries as a form of love, but you're right, it makes sense.
Yeah. It's about protecting ourselves in the relationship. It's about communicating our needs clearly and respectfully, even when it's tough.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, sometimes it means stepping away from a friendship that has become, you know, toxic or unhealthy.
Wow. Okay, that's powerful stuff. So we've got this foundation of receiving God's love and we're applying it to our friendships and all their complexity. But then what about family? Because those relationships can be even more complicated, I think.
Absolutely. And the text, it acknowledges that family can be incredibly rewarding, but also incredibly challenging.
Hmm.
It points to a couple of verses that I think offer some guidance.
Yeah.
One is Exodus 20.12, honor your father and your mother.
And I always think when I hear that one, okay, but what about when it's hard? Like what about when there's disagreement or hurt? How do we honor them then?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where the second verse comes in, Colossians 3.13. It says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you.
Okay. So we've got honoring our family even when we disagree with them, and then forgiveness as a key to breaking those cycles of hurt.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of wrestling with how to actually do that. Like honoring your parents when you feel like maybe they didn't always honor you, or forgiving someone when you're still carrying so much pain. I mean, that's not easy.
You're so right.
Yeah.
And it's not about pretending everything is okay or brushing things under the rug, but it's about choosing to see the humanity in our family members, recognizing that they too are flawed and make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess extending grace, right? Like I know I mess up all the time. I need grace from the people that I love, and I need to be willing to offer that same grace, back to them.
Exactly. And forgiveness, it's not just a one-time event, it's a process, it's a journey. And it might take time to work through those feelings of hurt and anger.
This is all making me think about chosen family too, like those close friends who are like family. Do these same principles apply? I mean, do we need to honor our friends in the same way and forgive them?
That's a great question. And I think
Mhm.
I think they absolutely do, whether it's blood relatives or those that we choose. honoring that bond, extending grace, practicing forgiveness. They're all vital to any meaningful
So
relationship.
it's like we're expanding our understanding of family, of what it means to love like Jesus within those close circles. But then there's another layer to all of this, right? Romantic relationships, dating, marriage. I mean, that's a whole other deep dive.
Yeah, it is. And the text doesn't shy away from it. It happily talks about approaching dating with a Christ-centered mindset.
Okay. Now I'm curious. What does that even look like? Because the text encourages us to seek godly character over chemistry. But let's be honest, sometimes that chemistry is pretty powerful.
It is. But the text is challenging us to look beyond those initial sparks, those surface level attractions, and focus on the deeper qualities.
Hmm.
Qualities like kindness, integrity, compassion, and a strong faith.
So it's about choosing a partner who aligns with your values, someone
Mhm.
who challenges you to grow in your faith, and someone who treats you with respect and kindness even when the butterflies
Right.
fade.
Chemistry is great, but it's character that's going to sustain a relationship, through the ups and downs of life.
And those ups and downs, I mean, they're inevitable, right? Especially when you're talking about marriage.
You're right. And the text actually uses this really powerful image to describe marriage. It compares it to Christ's love for the church.
Okay, I remember this. It uses that verse from Ephesians, right?
Yes. Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Okay, that's a pretty high bar. I mean, how do we even begin to apply that to our human relationships?
Well, it's about recognizing that love and marriage, it's a choice. It's a daily commitment to putting your spouse's needs before your own. It's about communicating with grace and patience, even when you disagree. It's about keeping faith as the foundation of your relationship, even when things get tough.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about how you handle it, how you approach it.
Exactly. And that takes humility, a willingness to listen, and a commitment to working things out together.
Yeah.
Remembering that you're on the same team, even when it feels like you're on opposite
Oh,
sides.
that's so true. And you know what? What I'm noticing here is kind of a theme, right? Whether we're talking about friendships or family or marriage, it it seems like loving like Jesus isn't about achieving some perfect ideal. It's something much more than that.
I think you've hit on something really important there. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up with grace and compassion. And it's about choosing love, even when it's hard.
This has been so insightful, but I feel like there's still so much to unpack. I'm ready to keep exploring what it means to love like Jesus, in a practical, everyday sense.
Me too. There's definitely a lot more to dig into. When we were talking about marriage being like Christ's love for the church, it really struck me just how radical that concept is.
Right. I mean, it's a level of commitment, a level of selflessness that kind of goes beyond what we usually see, at least, in our culture.
For sure. And that's why I think the text really emphasizes keeping faith as the foundation of the relationship. Because when those challenges come up, and they always do, right, when things get really hard, it's your shared faith that'll get you through it together.
Yeah, like an anchor, solid ground when everything else is shaky. But even with the best intentions, sometimes things get messy.
Right.
We we say things we don't mean. We hurt the people that we love, even in those closest relationships.
It's so true. And the text doesn't shy away from that. It really emphasizes that forgiveness, it's just a necessary part of loving like Jesus.
I struggle with this. Forgiveness is hard, especially when you've been really hurt. How do you actually do it?
Well, the text reminds us that forgiveness isn't about saying that what happened was okay. It's about letting go of that anger and resentment.
So it's more about our own healing than about the other person.
Exactly. It's recognizing that holding on to that resentment, it hurts us more than the person who actually hurt us,
Yeah.
right? It keeps us stuck.
Yeah, like we're carrying this weight around with us.
Yes, and the text says that forgiveness, it's not like a one-time thing. It's a process. It takes time.
And sometimes you have to set boundaries, right? Forgiveness doesn't mean, you have to keep letting yourself be hurt.
I think you're right. Healthy boundaries, it's important. It's
Mhm.
self-care, and it can actually help with forgiveness because you create that space to heal.
So we're saying that forgiveness, it's a process, it takes time, and sometimes you need boundaries. What about those situations where there's just ongoing conflict, like when you're constantly arguing with someone, even if you love them?
Well, the text suggests, approaching those conflicts with humility
Yeah.
and being willing to really listen.
Which is so hard. It's so easy to get defensive and just want to prove your point.
I know, I know. But that's not what loving like Jesus looks like, is it? It's about trying to understand, not winning.
Yeah. So you're not avoiding conflict, but you're approaching it differently.
Yeah. And I think it also takes a lot of grace, realizing that we all make mistakes and offering grace to others the same way that we would want to receive it.
Oh yeah. It's so easy to focus on being right. But we all need grace.
Exactly. And isn't that a beautiful reflection of God's love? He gives us grace, even when we don't deserve it, and we should try to do the same.
Speaking of reflecting God's love, one thing that really stood out in the text was serving others. It's like, okay, we can talk about loving like Jesus all day, but it has to be more than words, right?
Absolutely. The text really emphasizes how he was always trying to meet the needs of those around him, healing, feeding, comforting.
And not just the big things either. It was often those little everyday
Right.
things.
Simple acts of service, putting the needs of others before your own, just like Jesus did.
So it's like looking for ways to serve, even in our, normal day to day, like helping a neighbor, listening to a friend who's having a hard time, maybe volunteering somewhere.
All great examples. It's
Hmm.
about shifting your focus, outward, being aware of those around you, and being willing to help.
Being the hands and feet of Jesus,
Yeah,
putting your faith into action.
exactly. And I think it's important to say it's not just about doing stuff. It's a posture, right? Humility,
Mhm.
recognizing we're all connected. We all have something to offer.
Yeah. Seeing everyone as made in God's image and treating them with respect, no matter who they are or what they're going through.
That's so well said. And I think that leads perfectly into the last point the text makes about loving like Jesus.
Oh, okay. I'm curious now. What is it?
The text reminds us that loving like Jesus, it's not about, being perfect. It's about growing, changing,
That's a relief. Because honestly, we're all going to mess up.
right?
We're going to fall short.
We're human.
Mhm.
But the important thing is to keep trying, keep learning, keep growing.
Like a muscle you have to keep exercising.
Exactly. And we've got help, right?
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit, the Bible, our community.
We're all in this together. And that brings up a really interesting question the text asks. What is one small way you can practice loving like Jesus this week?
I love that question because it's so practical. It doesn't have to be some huge thing, just those little intentional acts of love.
Like sending a text message to someone you know is down, helping your neighbor, making that extra effort to listen to, that family member who drives you crazy.
Yes, all great things. It's about being intentional, choosing to love.
And remembering that you don't have to be perfect. Just try to grow.
As we wrap up this part, there's one more thing that keeps coming back to me. Loving like Jesus,
Mm.
it's not just about what we do, but who we're becoming.
Right. It's that inner change, becoming more loving, more forgiving, more like him.
And that doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong process.
We've covered so much: forgiveness, boundaries, serving, and this idea of transformation. I think there's even more to explore.
There is. We could talk for hours about all of this. But let's take a minute to think, and then we'll come back with some final thoughts.
All right, so we are back and ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into love like Jesus. We've talked about a lot, from receiving God's love to actually doing it, forgiveness, boundaries, serving others. My brain is full right now.
I know, mine too. There's just so much to this idea of loving like Jesus.
And I keep thinking about how the text said it's not about being perfect. It's this journey, We're always growing, always changing.
Yeah. We're all work in progress, right?
Yeah.
We're going to make mistakes, but God's grace is always there.
It's like we're always checking our compass,
Mhm.
making sure we're still headed in the right direction. And that's where those faith action steps are so helpful. The text keeps telling us to actually do something, to put these ideas into practice.
Yeah, because it can't just be talk, right? We have to live it.
And those steps, they can be so simple, Pray for someone who's hurt you. Send a text to a friend who's having a hard time. Help out a neighbor. Just little things, but they make a difference.
I love that. Being the hands and feet of Jesus, letting his love shine through in those little moments.
And you know what? I think those little things, they can spread. Like one act of kindness can inspire another act of kindness. It's like this ripple effect.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture. Even the smallest thing can make a difference. We all have the power to change the world around us.
You know, when we were talking of forgiveness before, it made me realize that sometimes the hardest person to forgive is ourselves.
Oh, that's so true. We're so hard on ourselves. We hold on to our mistakes.
And we forget, I think, that God's grace is for us too. We don't have to be perfect.
Yeah. We can offer that same grace to ourselves. Let go of the past. Forgive ourselves. We're loved just as we are.
It's like we don't have to prove anything, you know? We don't have to be worthy of love. It's already there.
Exactly. When we really get that, when we understand how much God loves us, we're free. We can just be ourselves.
And from there, you know, we can really love others the way Jesus loved us, not because we have to, but because we want to.
That's it. The text really gets at this,
Yeah.
you know. Loving like Jesus, it's not some trick. It's a change that happens inside.
It's letting God's love change us, soften us, fill us with compassion.
And when that happens, love just flows out. It touches everyone around us.
So as we finish up here, I just want to encourage you, listener, keep going, keep looking for that change. Let God's grace work in you and keep choosing love, even when it's hard, because that's how we show the world who Jesus is.
And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We're all on this journey together, and God is with us every step of the way.
So well said. And with that, we'll leave you with one last question. What's one small way you can love like Jesus this week? Let his love be your guide and see how it changes you and everyone around you.